Welcome to the Brilliant Fertility Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Rose, and this podcast exists to help illuminate the path ahead of you. With expert interviews, clinical pearls, and real client success stories, my intention is to bring you hope for what's possible on this journey and to give you tools and resources to navigate the ups and downs on the road before you. If you find this podcast helpful, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And I have a big request. If you have a minute, can you leave us a 5-star review? And let us know, what did you learn? What did you come away with? Did you leave with that spark of hope? This helps more people like you find the podcast. My mission is to support as many humans as possible on their path to become parent. And by you sharing and subscribing, you're part of that mission too. And I'm so grateful for you for being here. Welcome back. This is our PCOS Part 2 episode. And based on feedback on our first episode about PCOS and some of the questions that I get in practice, as well as some of the bad advice I have heard over the years for people who have PCOS, I wanted to put this little PCOS quickie episode out, really covering 3 big bad pieces of advice that I've heard when it comes to PCOS and fertility and what to do instead. So number 1, this piece of advice, we talked about it in the last episode. And if you have PCOS and you have struggled with weight, you have likely heard this over and over: to eat less and exercise more. And this is such a frustrating piece of advice because it's truly based on this outdated thought that calories in have to be less than calories out. But when it comes to the hormonal involvement in PCOS, this rarely actually results in meaningful weight loss. You might have an initial weight loss followed by a plateau. It just gets frustrating because you keep shaving calories and keep moving your body more, and it just doesn't move the needle, and it's exhausting. And it's probably part of what contributes to the rise of eating disorders in women with PCOS. PCOS patients actually have a 3 times greater risk of developing an eating disorder than people without PCOS. And while we need a lot more research on why that's the case, the fact is that giving bad advice like eat less, exercise more can absolutely contribute to an eating disorder. So I'm extremely mindful about this in my patients. And I've had so many patients over the years coming to me who are like, I am eating 900 calories a day and I am exercising for 2 hours a day and nothing is working. And so one of the things that happens as you eat less is your metabolism will recognize, hey, we're not getting a lot of calories here. So we have to lower the metabolism in order to match the number of calories we're getting. We actually have to slow down all these processes in the body because we're not getting enough energy. And so one of the things that I notice in people who are not getting enough calories is that they are exhausted. And it's partly mental exhaustion from just having so much of your thought energy going to what can I eat? But it's also physical exhaustion because you're literally not getting enough energy. So while it can feel a little scary to eat more and exercise differently, it's actually really important so that we're not headed down this slippery slope into an eating disorder, or it doesn't even have to be a full-blown anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, but even just having so much mental energy going towards what you're eating. There is a classification of disordered eating called orthorexia, where it just sort of becomes obsessed around food. And it can look like tracking your food, tracking your calories, tracking your macros. There's just so much thought energy going there all the time. And this is why working with someone who's not only knowledgeable about PCOS, but also knowledgeable about these symptoms of disordered eating so that we can catch these and work with you to start learning how to eat in a way that really nourishes your body. So, a sort of similar piece of advice that I've heard people getting is that you can't have carbs. And unfortunately, I've even seen some really prominent people in the health field say things like carbs are causing your PCOS. And that's just absolute bull crap. Carbs can't cause your PCOS. As we talked about in our first episode on PCOS, it is something that has a strong genetic component. And yes, maybe the genetics load the gun and the environment pulls the trigger. So lifestyle can exacerbate PCOS, but eating carbs is not what causes PCOS. I've had physicians tell my patients that not only should they not be eating sugar or refined carbohydrates, but they should not be eating fruit. And like, if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see that this is like a full face palm moment. Fruit is actually a really important piece of an anti-inflammatory diet. So let's break this down. Carbs are not the enemy. However, we want to make sure that you have a lot of comfort in knowing how to structure your meals in a way that keeps your blood sugar steady. Because what we don't want is a situation in which not only are you under fueling, so you're getting too few calories, but then because you are craving energy, you're probably going to be craving sugar. And then you're being told, well, don't eat the sugar, don't eat the fruit, basically don't have joy in your life. And then you end up in situations where you're just so exhausted and the opportunity arises to eat the sugary thing, eat the carb. And this is when binging is more likely to happen because, both physically we're craving energy and psychologically, when you have been told don't eat that, your brain is like, I just want to eat that. Like I'm just so fixated on that it's then hard to stop. So both of these pieces of bad advice, the eat less, exercise more, don't have carbs, both of these can actually further contribute to some of the issues that we see in PCOS. And what's interesting is, with my background in hypnosis and working with changing habits that are rooted in our unconscious beliefs and just working with the unconscious mind in general, when you say like, don't do that, when you tell a child like, don't touch that, it's like, oh, they don't hear the don't, they just want to touch it. And such a similar process is happening for us as adults. It's like our unconscious mind doesn't hear the don't. So when you're like, don't eat the sugar, it's like, oh, I just want the sugar. And so really having an understanding of the unconscious mind, giving yourself so much grace. And instead of focusing on the what to avoid and taking out all the joy, we want to focus more on what to include. So instead of all of your energy and your mental thoughts going towards, oh, I can't have that, I can't have that, I can't have that. And then you get stuck in this paralysis of, whoa, what can I have? Like I remember standing in front of the refrigerator, like just fridge open for maybe 10 minutes at a time, just staring into the refrigerator, being like, well, okay, what do I eat? And I was in such a state of paralysis when I had been told that some of the health issues I was having would likely benefit from, doing all these eliminations from my diet, eliminate gluten and dairy and sugar and eggs. And it's like, okay, well, what's left? And so when we can focus on, well, what can we have? And by the way, there's actually no good quality research to show that anyone with PCOS needs to avoid any food groups, including gluten and dairy. This is going to go very much based on an individual basis. But when we look at what to include, we want a good quality protein. And I usually have my patients and clients aim for around 30 grams of protein with each meal. And I know that can feel like, oh my gosh, that is so much protein. I give my clients templates and visuals to really understand like what does a portion of that look like with many different foods, both plant and animal based, so that we're not obsessively tracking macros and calories in an app. Like I want people to be able to learn visually, what does this look like? And what does this feel like in my body? After we put that emphasis on the protein, I'm also putting emphasis on antioxidants and fiber. So that means getting as much color in your diet as possible and as much variety of produce as possible. And so the thing about fruit is actually a really wonderful source of fiber. So telling people with PCOS to avoid fruit is insane to me because some of our highest fiber foods actually come from fruit. So raspberries have 8 grams per cup. An apple is 4 grams of fiber for one medium apple. Blueberries is 4 grams per cup. And fiber is really important for multiple reasons. And with PCOS, having an increased risk later in life for heart disease and diabetes, fiber is really important for regulating blood sugar. So when we have a tummy that is full of fiber, it actually slows how glucose is absorbed into the bloodstream. So it blunts these glucose spikes that we might otherwise see in a diet that's low in fiber. So I'm actually a big fan of fruit. And yes, there are going to be some fruits that have less fiber and are higher glycemic index. And it's important that you break down with your PCOS knowledgeable provider what balance of fruits feels good for your body. The other part about fruits is especially when we have, our really dark, richly colored fruits like blackberries and raspberries and blueberries and acai and strawberries, is this is a really great source of antioxidants. Antioxidants are protective. So they protect your blood vessels, they protect your egg cells in your ovaries, they protect all of those little nerve endings in your body. And so, PCOS being a condition that tends to have higher oxidative stress, we don't want to avoid food groups that are high in antioxidants. So, this is really just my way of giving you maybe hopefully more flexibility, more opportunity for what's possible for what you're eating, and releasing that fear of carbs. As someone who went through the keto diet and really obsessing around carbs for too many years of my life, I feel like I lost so much enjoyment around food for so many years. And when we're kind of focused on almost punishing the body, it's so hard to also enjoy life at its fullest. So I hope that this piece of information about being able to eat more, enjoy more, and learn how to structure meals in a really nourishing way actually allows you to enjoy life more. Another aspect of meals that's important to keep balance is including some healthy fats. Now, I want to stress that there's really we don't want to put emphasis on like there are bad foods and there are good foods and there's bad fats and there's good fats, but there are some fats that are going to be more anti-inflammatory. So your omega-3 fatty acids. This will be found in like your wild caught fish. So a couple servings of salmon per week is a great idea. If you like other seafoods like shrimp or scallops, this can be a great source of healthy fats. Monounsaturated fats, so olive oil and olives, are also great to include in an anti-inflammatory PCOS friendly diet. And I like to include nuts and seeds. Again, you're going to get some fiber from those and some fat and a little bit of protein as well. I really don't believe that there's any one food group that needs to be eliminated. And I haven't seen good results, honestly, in practice with people who have done major avoidance. So keeping that in mind, there's so much more flexibility that's available to you. And I cover this more in depth in a PCOS fertility masterclass. I'm going to link this in our show notes for today. And in this masterclass, we break down, what are some of the drivers of PCOS symptoms? What are the labs that I want to see for my PCOS patients to understand what's happening with their unique situation? What are the optimal lab values? Because oftentimes people are told, like, oh, your labs are normal, but we need more context than that. We want to understand, like, well, where might someone have been in their cycle when these labs were drawn, especially with hormonal fluctuations, and were the right labs ordered? We talked about that in our first episode in PCOS as well, some of the lab markers to look for that allow us to diagnose PCOS. But I'm also looking deeper into, beyond how to diagnose it, what are some of these drivers, like high blood sugar, insulin resistance, vitamin D deficiency, inflammation? What are those values? And what are optimal values? And what do we do about these? So if we've identified that there might be one or more exacerbating factors, then we can start to break down what's most important for this individual with PCOS. How do we start to build in stress resilience so that they don't also have high stress hormones that are driving their blood sugar up and then exacerbating their PCOS symptoms? How do we get inflammation down? How do we start to avoid environmental toxins in a sustainable way? And I break down all of this. It's about a 90-minute masterclass. Again, check the show notes because I will link it there. But that's a really helpful tool that I have incorporated into my trainings to help give people more understanding of their PCOS. All right, our final piece of bad advice, and maybe it's not so much a piece of advice as just something a lot of people with PCOS have heard upon their diagnosis, is that you will have to have fertility treatments in order to get pregnant. And the fact is, it's just not true. A lot of people with PCOS will pursue fertility treatments, and not everyone has to. So if you have a lot of fear around approaching fertility treatments like IUI or IVF, or if you've been told that's your only option, but you haven't dived into lifestyle factors and nutrition and targeted supplementation, then the fact is we really haven't covered the necessary bases. And I believe that everyone who is going to be approaching fertility treatments really needs to have a solid foundation of understanding what their body needs before they jump into those treatments, so that we can ensure those treatments are as successful as possible. But within my patients with PCOS, going through the last 5 years that I've kept spreadsheets of, who's been part of the Brilliant Fertility Program, who I've seen one-to-one, what the diagnosis was, how long it took for them to conceive, and what methods they ended up using for conception, whether it was assisted or unassisted. My patients with PCOS are actually far less likely to have pursued fertility treatments, because after we understand what their root cause drivers of PCOS are and we begin treating them, they begin ovulating more regularly. And so they're having more opportunities to conceive unassisted. So there's that. That's been pretty cool. It's actually only been about 10% of my PCOS patients who have gone on to receive fertility treatments for conception. And of those, that's a pretty small number over the last 5 years that I've really been tracking this data. Of those, actually, I've only had 2 who have pursued IVF because IUI had been supportive in them getting pregnant. So there's so much opportunity for healing with this. If it hasn't been explored yet, I really encourage you to reach out to someone who can be on your PCOS fertility team. If you're not quite ready to dive into that, you're not quite sure what that looks like yet or how to qualify a provider, then definitely check out the PCOS Masterclass and let me know what else is coming up for you, how else I can support you on this journey. I'm here for you. So feel free to reach out to me in my DMs, send me an email, and we'll get you the support you need. All right, if you learned something here today, then I would love for you to take 30 seconds to leave us a review. Let us know how this podcast is helping you. When you do take that moment, it helps this podcast reach more people like you. And my mission is to help as many people as possible get healthier so that they can have healthy pregnancies and healthy babies. All right, you guys, have a great rest of your day. I hope you have a really amazing meal at some point in your day, and see you next time.